Commander Hyenwu stood on the bridge of the Eternal Claw and watched the dead ship float in the darkness. It was small compared to Vryn vessels, barely the size of a mining hauler. The metal hull was scarred and pitted from years of drifting through space. No lights blinked on its surface. No energy readings came from its core. It was a corpse, cold and silent. Human design, his second officer reported. Colony ship, based on the configuration. Abandoned approximately 30 years ago. Hyenwu nodded slowly. The humans were a new species in galactic space, barely 50 years since first contact. They had appeared suddenly with crude faster-than-light engines and an odd eagerness to meet other civilizations. Most species found them strange but harmless. The Vryn had largely ignored them, focused as they were on their war with the Kethran hierarchy. Any survivors? Hyenwu asked. Negative. Life support failed decades ago, but the data cores appear intact. Hyenwu felt a flutter of interest. Technology was the lifeblood of Empire. The Vryn had conquered 40 star systems not through numbers, but through superior engineering. Every advancement, every new weapon or shield system, came from studying and improving upon what they found. A human ship, even a small one, might contain something useful. Prepare a salvage team, he ordered. I want everything brought aboard. Engines, computers, even the furniture. Chief Engineer Jiwan will catalog it all. Salvage operation took 6 hours. Hyenwu watched through cameras as his team moved through the derelict's corridors. The interior was cramped and inefficient by Vryn standards. Cables ran along walls in seemingly random patterns. Rooms were oddly shaped, as if the humans had simply filled available space rather than planning proper layouts. But there were surprises too. The reactor chamber made Jiwan stop and stare for a full minute. The containment vessel was smaller than it should be for a ship this size. The power conduits were arranged in a pattern that looked almost decorative, like art rather than engineering. Commander Giwan's voice crackled over the com. I need to show you something. Hyenwu met her in the main cargo bay an hour later. Giwan was young for a chief engineer, barely into her 3rd decade, but she had a sharp mind and sharper instincts. She stood beside a set of data cores, her face troubled. What is it? Hyenwu asked. G1 activated a holographic display. Blueprints appeared in the air, spinning slowly. They showed the reactor design from the derelict. Hyenwu leaned closer, studying the diagrams. It's wrong, Jiwan said quietly. Wrong how? Wrong in every way. She highlighted several sections. Look at these power couplings. They're connected in parallel and series simultaneously. That's impossible. It would create feedback loops that would destroy the system in seconds. Hyenwu frowned. Perhaps it's a translation error. Human mathematical notation might be different from ours. Check that. The math is the same. Basic physics doesn't change between species, Commander. Giwan pulled up another schematic. And look at this. The fuel containment uses materials and combinations that shouldn't be stable. According to our understanding of molecular bonds, this alloy can't exist. Yet the ship flew, Hyenwu said. It crossed light years of space, as Giwan admitted. That's what troubles me. Hyenwu studied the blueprints again. They were elegant in a strange way. Like looking at a painting where all the proportions were slightly wrong but somehow still beautiful. The more he looked, the more his eyes wanted to slide away to look at something else. Continue the analysis, he ordered. Assign your best team. I want to understand how this works. Jiwan hesitated. Commander, perhaps we should proceed carefully. If we don't understand the principles, then we'll learn them, Hyenwu interrupted. The Vryn didn't build an empire by being cautious. Engineer. We'll master this just as we've mastered everything else. Over the next week, Giwan assembled a team of 12 engineers. They worked in shifts, carefully translating human technical documents and studying the recovered components. The reactor was disassembled piece by piece. Every circuit was mapped. Every material was analyzed. The problems multiplied. The wiring diagrams showed connections that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. The structural supports were made from materials that tested as both solid and liquid depending on how they were measured. The computer systems used logic gates that could be on, off, or something else entirely, a third state that shouldn't exist in binary computing. On the 8th day, senior engineer Temin had a breakthrough. He'd been studying the power coupling system for 16 hours straight, refusing to rest. He finally understood how the parallel series connection worked. His eyes lit up with comprehension. Then he started screaming. The medical team found him curled on the floor of his lab, hands pressed against his head. He kept screaming about angles, about how the corners of the room were wrong, about how space itself was bent in ways he could see but couldn't describe. They sedated him. He was still sedated 3 days later, occasionally whimpering in his sleep. Han-Wu visited the medical bay and looked down at Temin's sleeping face. The engineer's eyes moved rapidly beneath closed lids, as if watching something terrible. What happened to him? Han-Wu asked the doctor. We don't know. Brain scans show unusual activity in his visual cortex, but there's no physical damage. It's as if he's seeing something that isn't there, or perhaps seeing something that is there but shouldn't be visible. Han-Wu returned to the research lab. Juan met him at the door, her face drawn with exhaustion. We need to stop, she said without preamble. Explain. Gi-won led him to her terminal. She pulled up a human document they'd recovered. It was a maintenance manual filled with warnings and safety procedures. This section, Juan said, highlighting several paragraphs, it's a warning to human technicians. It says that certain components should only be serviced by personnel who have undergone neural adaptation training. It warns about conceptual hazards. Conceptual hazards? Han-Wu repeated. Ideas that are dangerous to think about. Patterns that can damage the mind by being perceived. Juan's hand shook slightly. Commander, I don't think Taman had a breakdown. I think he understood something he wasn't meant to understand. Something his brain couldn't process safely. Han-Wu was silent for a long moment. He thought about the Empire, about the war with the Kethrans, about the dozens of species that would love to see the Vryn fall. He thought about power and progress, and the cost of both. We continue, he said finally, but implement new safety protocols. Limit study sessions to 4 hours. Mandate rest periods. And anyone who shows signs of distress is to be removed immediately. Juan looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she simply nodded. That night, Han-Wu couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the blueprints, about those impossible angles and contradictory designs. He thought about Teeman's screams, and he wondered what the humans had built that could break a mind just by being understood. 3 weeks had passed since they brought the human ship aboard, and the research station orbiting Vryn Prime had become a place of whispers. Engineers spoke in hushed tones in the corridors. Some refused to enter certain labs. Others worked with a frantic intensity, as if racing against something invisible. Ji-won had become the lead researcher after her predecessor. Senior Director Kyung had walked calmly to an airlock and opened it without a suit. The security footage showed him smiling as the air rushed out. His last words, recorded by the airlock's internal system, were, "I finally see the shape of it. It's beautiful." 12 engineers had suffered complete psychological breaks. 4 more had requested transfers off the station. The rest continued working, but Gi-won saw the strain in their eyes. She saw it in the mirror, too. The problem wasn't that human technology was too advanced. The problem was that it was fundamentally wrong in ways that somehow worked anyway. Gon sat in her office, reviewing the latest analysis reports. On her screen, a simple human circuit diagram rotated slowly. It showed a basic power regulator, the kind that would be used in any standard ship system. Except the circuit had components that existed in superposition, literally in multiple states at once, until directly observed. The wiring formed patterns that suggested 6-dimensional geometry, which was impossible because they lived in a 4-dimensional universe. Yet the circuit worked. They'd tested it. It regulated power perfectly, more efficiently than any Vryn equivalent. A knock at her door made her jump. It was Minho, one of the junior technicians. He was barely 20, fresh from the academy, and he'd volunteered for this project with enthusiasm. That enthusiasm was gone now. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Chief Engineer," he said, "I found something." He held out a human datapad, one of dozens recovered from the derelict. Most had contained routine logs and personal messages. This one was different. G1 took the pad and read the text on the screen. It was in English, which the translation software easily converted. The message was short. To whoever finds this, stop. Whatever you think you can learn from our technology, it's not worth it. Our engineering isn't advanced. It's adapted. Adapted to human neurology specifically. We can process these concepts because our brains evolved to handle paradox and contradiction. Yours probably didn't. The blueprints contain safety features, but those only work for human minds. For everyone else, they're just patterns, dangerous patterns. Please just stop. The message was unsigned and undated. G1 read it 3 times. Then she showed it to Minho. How long have you had this? She asked. I found it this morning, Minho said. It was in a personal storage locker, hidden behind some clothing. Gi-won thought about Taemin, still sedated and medical. She thought about Kyung, who had seen beauty in the airlock. She thought about the way her own dreams had changed, filled with shapes that hurt to remember. I'm taking this to Commander Haeon-woo, she said. She found Haeon-woo in the command center, reviewing casualty reports from the war. The Kethrans had destroyed another supply convoy. 300 Vrin had died, Commander Guan said. We need to shut down the research project. Haeon-woo looked up, his face tired. Show me why. Gi-won handed him the datapad. He read the message, his expression unchanging. When he finished, he set the pad down gently. Is this authentic? He asked. We believe so. The file dates match the ship's abandonment timeline. Then the humans knew their technology was dangerous, Haeon-woo said. Yet they used it anyway. Yes, but which means it can be used safely. We simply need to understand how. Gi-won felt frustration rise in her chest. Commander, with respect, the message explicitly states that human brains are different, that they evolved to handle these concepts. We didn't. Our minds aren't built for this. Haeon-woo stood and walked to the viewport. Beyond the transparent metal, Vrin Prime hung in space, beautiful and blue. 40 star systems called the Vrin, their rulers. Billions of citizens depended on Vrin's strength. Do you know why we're winning the war, engineer? Haeon-woo asked. Superior technology, Juan answered automatically. Exactly. Every advance we make tips the balance in our favor. Every new weapon, every improved shield, every faster engine. The Kethrons outnumber us 3-1. Without technological superiority, we'd already be extinct. He turned to face her. 300 dead in yesterday's convoy attack? That's 300 families destroyed, 300 futures erased. And you want me to throw away a potential advantage because it's difficult to understand? I want you to throw it away because it's killing our people, Ji-won said. 12 engineers have lost their minds. 12 families destroyed, just like those convoy deaths. 12 versus 300, Haeon-woo said quietly. And if we crack this technology, how many thousands might we save? Gi-won had no answer for that. That night, she returned to the labs. The other engineers had gone to their quarters, leaving the facility in emergency lighting. Gi-won walked through the silent corridors, past sealed labs containing human components. She stopped at the medical bay. Through the window, she could see Somin, one of the engineers who'd broken. Somin sat upright in her bed, staring at nothing. Her lips moved constantly, forming words without sound. Guan entered the room quietly. Salman didn't acknowledge her presence. She just kept staring, kept mouthing words. Salman. Ji-won said softly. Can you hear me? Salman's eyes flickered toward her, but Ji-won wasn't sure the other woman actually saw her. Then Salman spoke, her voice rough from disuse. The shape of causality bends, Salman said. I can see it now. See how one moment flows into the next? How probability collapses into reality? It's all math, Gi-won. Beautiful, terrible math. The humans built their technology by engineering the math itself. They don't work around physical laws, they work through them, exploiting the gaps between what is and what could be. Somin, you're not making sense. Making perfect sense, Salman said, and smiled. It was not a happy expression. That's the problem. I understand now. I understand too much. The human blueprints aren't just designs, they're proofs. Mathematical proofs that reality is flexible if you know where to push. And once you see the proofs, you can't unsee them. You can't go back to believing space is just space, or that time flows in only one direction. Guan felt cold. The doctors say you'll recover. Recover? Salman laughed high and sharp. I don't want to recover. Going back to normal ignorance would be like going blind. I've seen the truth, Juan. The humans live with this truth every day. They built a civilization while knowing that reality is just suggestions. They're either the bravest species in the galaxy or the most insane. Giwan left the medical bay and walked back to her office. She sat at her desk for a long time, staring at the human circuit diagram on her screen. She thought about stopping, about destroying all the human blueprints and forgetting this ever happened, but she thought about the war too. About 300 dead. About Haiyan Wu's tired face and the weight of an empire's survival. She opened a new file and began writing her report. They would continue the research. They would take precautions. And maybe, if they were very lucky and very careful, they would master this without losing more minds. She didn't believe it. But she wrote the report anyway. Outside her window, Frin Prime turned slowly in the darkness, unaware of the poison they'd invited aboard their station. Dr. Deho was a xenopsychologist, not an engineer. He'd been brought to the station after the 12th breakdown, tasked with finding ways to protect the researchers' minds. He'd spent 2 weeks studying the affected engineers, trying to understand what exactly was breaking inside their heads. What he found fascinated and horrified him. The engineers weren't going insane in the traditional sense. They were perceiving things that normal Vrin minds weren't equipped to process. It was like showing a color outside the visible spectrum to someone except instead of colors. It was concepts, mathematical truths, geometric patterns that existed in more dimensions than their brains could naturally comprehend. Deho had an idea. It was dangerous and possibly stupid. But he was a scientist first and cautious second. He began experimenting on himself. Every day. He would enter a sensory deprivation chamber and study the human blueprints for exactly 30 minutes. No more. He'd trained in meditation techniques from a dozen different species, learning to quiet his mind and accept paradox without forcing resolution. When contradictory information appeared in the blueprint circuits that were both open and closed, materials that were both solid and liquid, he didn't try to rationalize it. He simply accepted it. After 2 weeks, something changed. He could look at the blueprints without feeling that sliding sensation, that wrongness that made other engineers look away. He could hold the contradictions in his mind like carrying water in cupped hands. Carefully, temporarily, but he could do it. He reported his findings to Giwan. "You're doing what?" she asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "Controlled exposure," Deho explained. They sat in her office, the door sealed. Think of it like building immunity to a poison. Small doses, carefully measured, with time to recover between exposures. Taman tried something similar, Giwan said. He studied for 16 hours straight. That's the key difference, Deho said. Duration and preparation. I go in, calm, centered, and I never exceed 30 minutes. And I'm training myself to think differently. To accept impossibility is a valid state of being. Guan studied him carefully. You look tired? I am tired, Deho admitted. This isn't easy, but I'm making progress. I think I can help the engineering team understand these designs without breaking. Think or know? In science, we never truly know, Deho said with a slight smile. But my confidence is high. Guan made a decision she'd regret for the rest of her life. She approved Deho's training program for the remaining engineers. Over the next month, Deho worked with 6 volunteers. They practiced meditation and mental flexibility exercises. They learned to observe without judging, to see without needing to understand. And slowly, carefully, they studied the human blueprints. 2 of the volunteers dropped out. overwhelmed despite the precautions. But for continued. And on the 43rd day of the program, Deho achieved something remarkable. He successfully replicated a human tool. It was a simple thing. According to the human documentation, a plasma torch used for cutting metal during construction and repairs. The blueprint was only 3 pages long. Far simpler than the reactor designs or weapons systems. Deho built it himself in a sealed laboratory. Guan and Heianwu watched through reinforced glass as he carefully assembled the components. The device was small, no larger than a Vrin hand tool. It had a grip, a power cell, and an emitter nozzle. Activating, Deho said. He pressed the control stud. A beam of blue-white plasma appeared at the nozzle's tip, about as long as his finger. It looked like any standard plasma torch. Then Deho touched it to a piece of Vrin battle steel. The steel didn't just melt. It ceased to exist. The plasma cut through it like it wasn't there, leaving edges so smooth they seemed unreal. But that wasn't the remarkable part. The remarkable part was what happened to the space where the steel had been. G1 leaned closer to the glass. Where the plasma had cut, the air looked wrong. It shimmered like heat distortion, but cold radiated from it. Through the shimmer, she could see the wall behind the cut piece of steel. But the perspective was off, skewed, as if she was looking at it from 2 angles at once. "What is that?" she whispered. "A wound," Deho said calmly. "The plasma doesn't just cut matter. It cuts space-time. It removes the steel from causality entirely. The shimmer is reality healing itself, filling in the gap." Heianwu stared at the impossible tool. "How long does the healing take?" "According to the human manual, about 4 hours for a cut this size, and this is a construction tool?" "Yes, Commander. The humans use this for everyday repairs." Heianwu turned to Guan. "Contact Fleet Admiral Nari immediately. Tell her we've achieved a breakthrough." 3 days later, Admiral Nari arrived at the station with a military science team. She was a severe woman, tall even for a Vrin, with eyes that calculated costs and lives and victories. She listened to Deho's explanation without interrupting. "Can you make more?" she asked when he finished. "Yes, but how many?" "Admiral, you should understand that this technology has risks. Even using the torch requires training. Anyone who looks at the plasma beam for too long starts seeing the dimensional cuts. It affects their perception." "How long is too long?" Nari asked. "We're not sure yet. More than a few seconds? Certainly." Nari nodded. "Acceptable. We'll train soldiers with timed exposure protocols. How long to produce 1,000 units?" Deho blinked. 1,000. "Admiral, I've built one." "The manufacturing process alone is not my concern," Nari interrupted. "The Kethrans have been advancing through the outer colonies. They've taken 6 systems in the last month. We need weapons." "How long?" Juan stepped forward. "Admiral, with respect, we've only replicated the simplest human tool. We don't fully understand the principles yet. Moving to mass production would be premature." "Engineer, we're losing this war," Nari said flatly. "The Kethrans have numbers. We have technology. This gives us an edge. You'll begin production immediately." "That's an order." After Nari left, Juan found Deho sitting alone in his laboratory. The plasma torch sat on the workbench, innocuous and terrible. "I've made a mistake," Deho said quietly. "You created a breakthrough," Jiwan said, though the words felt hollow. "I created a weapon that wounds reality," Deho corrected. "I was so focused on whether I could that I never stopped to ask whether I should." He laughed bitterly. "How human of me." "The Admiral would have found another way," Jiwan said. "Another engineer, another approach. But it was my hands that built it." Deho picked up the torch, examining it with something like horror. "Do you know what else I found in the human documentation?" "Warnings about cumulative exposure." "The dimensional cuts don't just affect space-time. They affect perception itself. Soldiers who use these tools regularly start seeing in more dimensions. They perceive angles that don't exist in normal reality. Most adept. Some don't. Some go mad," Giwan said. "Some transcend," Deho corrected. The humans have a word for it: ascension psychosis. When someone understands too much about the true nature of reality and can't function in normal society anymore. Juan sat down beside him. The Admiral wants 1,000 of these, and we'll make 1,000 windows into madness, Deho said, and we'll teach our soldiers to look through them. That night, the first batch of military volunteers arrived at the station. They were young and eager, ready to learn the new weapon that would turn the war. Yuan watched them file into the training center. Laughing and confident, she thought about Salmon, still in medical. Still mumbling about the shape of causality, she thought about the humans, who built such tools and somehow remained sane, and she wondered what they'd done to the Vrin Empire by leaving that ship to be found, with all its impossible secrets waiting inside. The human ship appeared in Vrin space without warning, which should have been impossible. Every system had sensor nets that detected faster-than-light arrivals hours in advance. But the soul's promise simply appeared, one moment absent and the next moment present, as if it had always been there, and they'd only just noticed. Haiyan Wu received the alert while reviewing production schedules for the plasma torches. 600 units completed so far. Training was proceeding ahead of schedule. The first combat deployment was planned for next month. A human diplomatic vessel requests permission to dock, the communications officer reported. They're asking specifically for you, Commander. Haiyan Wu felt an odd flutter in his chest, anticipation or dread, he wasn't sure which. Grant permission, but maintain full security protocols. The human ambassador's name was Hannah. She arrived with no guards, no weapons, and no ceremony. She was small by Vrin standards, dark-haired and dark-eyed, with a calm expression that suggested she'd seen much and been surprised by little. They met in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking the station's main hangar. Haiyan Wu stood as she entered. Protocol dictated certain courtesies between species. Ambassador Hannah, he said. Welcome to Research Station Gamma. Commander Haiyan Wu, she replied in perfect Vrin. Thank you for seeing me. I'll be direct. We know you recovered one of our derelict vessels. We know you're attempting to reverse engineer our technology, and we're here to ask you to stop. Haiyan Wu had expected anger or demands. The simple request caught him off guard. You're not here to threaten us? No, Hannah said. We're here to warn you. May I sit? They sat across from each other at the conference table. Hannah folded her hands, her posture relaxed, but focused. How many have you lost? She asked. Lost? Engineers? Scientists? Technicians? Anyone who studied the blueprints too closely. Her eyes were steady, knowing how many have broken. Haiyan Wu considered lying, considered dismissing the question. Steady found himself answering truthfully. 14 complete psychological breaks. For suicides. 27 cases of what our doctors call perceptual dysfunction. Hannah closed her eyes briefly. I'm sorry. We tried to prevent this. The warning message on the datapad, Haiyan Wu said. One of many. Our ships carry automatic warnings in 47 languages. They're designed to broadcast on all frequencies when salvaged by non-humans. But your salvage team had their communications set to narrowband. The warnings never reached you. She opened a small case and pulled out a data crystal. Haiyan Wu gestured to the holographic projector. Hannah inserted the crystal, and images appeared in the air between them. This is the new Adelaide, Hannah said. The hologram showed a human colony ship, sleek and white. She was our first long-range colony vessel, launched 230 years ago. Beautiful, wasn't she? The image shifted. The same ship, but different. The hull was still intact, but something about it looked wrong. The proportions were slightly off, as if seen through distorted glass. This is the new Adelaide after her maiden voyage, Hannah continued. The crew arrived at their destination safely. All 3,000 colonists healthy and ready to begin their new life. But something had changed during the journey. Do you see it? Haiyan Wu leaned forward. The ship looks odd. The ship occupies multiple dimensional states simultaneously, Hannah said. During the faster-than-light journey, the experimental drive created resonance patterns that affected the vessel's relationship with baseline reality. The crew didn't notice at first. They'd been aboard for months. They'd adapted. The image shifted again. This time, it showed human faces. They looked normal at first glance. and Hyanwu realized their expressions were too fluid, changing subtly in ways that suggested they were experiencing emotions in more than the usual 3 dimensions. "We learned something terrible that day," Hannah said. "Human neurology is unique. Our brains developed in ways that let us process paradox and contradiction. We can hold multiple contradictory truths simultaneously. We can perceive quantum superposition and not collapse into madness. Most humans can't explain this. It's intuitive, built into our cognition. But it means we can use technology that would destroy other species' minds." "Why?" Hyanwu asked. "Why build technology like this at all?" "Because we had no choice," Hannah said simply. "Humanity developed in isolation. We never met another sapient species until we achieved faster-than-light travel. We had no standard galactic technology tree to follow. We invented everything ourselves, following paths that made sense to human minds. By the time we discovered we weren't alone in the universe, our entire technological civilization was built on principles that only work for us." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "We considered abandoning it all, starting over with conventional technology. But that would take centuries, and in the meantime, we'd be helpless if hostile species found us. So we kept our cursed technology and learned to live with it." Hannah turned back to face him. "That derelict you found the eternal song? She was abandoned because her crew ascended, all 200 of them simultaneously, during a routine patrol. They saw too deeply into the nature of the drive system. By the time we found them, they could no longer communicate in language. They existed in states we couldn't comprehend. We had to place them in specialized medical facilities where they remain today, lost in dimensions we can't reach." Hyanwu felt cold. "You left the ship adrift. With all its technology intact, we tried to destroy her," Hannah said. "But vessels like that become difficult to affect. They're not entirely in our reality anymore. The best we could do was strip her of fuel and set her adrift, hoping she'd never be found. We marked her in our charts as a hazard. Clearly, our precautions weren't enough." She returned to her seat. "I'm authorized to offer you assistance. We have translation matrices simplified interfaces that will let you use our technology without understanding it. Like operating a vehicle without knowing how the engine works. You lose efficiency, but you keep your sanity." "We've already made progress," Hyanwu said. "We've successfully replicated some of your tools." Hannah's expression flickered worry, quickly masked. "Which tools?" "A plasma torch. Used in construction?" "The dimensional cutter," Hannah said flatly. "You've mass-produced reality-cutting tools for soldiers who don't understand what they're seeing. Commander, that's not progress. That's disaster waiting to happen. It's also a weapon that could end our war," Hyanwu said. "At what cost?" Hannah's voice rose slightly, the first crack in her calm. "Do you understand what happens to soldiers who use those tools regularly? They start existing partially outside normal space-time. They perceive combat in multiple dimensions. Some become unstoppable warriors. Others forget they're mortal and die because they see possibilities instead of reality. All of them eventually drift too far from baseline existence to ever come back." She placed both hands flat on the table. "The humans in our military who carry dimensional weapons undergo psychological screening every week. They take neural stabilizers. They're limited to 2 hours of exposure per month. And even with all those precautions, we lose 10% of them to ascension psychosis every year. They're heroes who sacrifice not just their lives, but their sanity for humanity's survival. And you want to hand these tools to soldiers with no preparation, no support, no understanding of what they're sacrificing." Hyanwu stood. "Admiral Nari wants 1,000 units ready for deployment next month." "Then stop her," Hannah said, "before it's too late." "It's already too late," Hyanwu said quietly. "The Cathrons are winning. We need this advantage." Hannah picked up her data crystal and returned it to its case. When she looked at him, her expression was sad. "Then let me tell you what happens next," she said. "You'll deploy the weapons. They'll work brilliantly at first. You'll win battles you thought impossible. Your soldiers will return changed. Some will be fine, maybe 20%. The rest will have seen too much. Some will be manageable with medication and therapy. Others will be lost forever, trapped in perceptual states your civilization has no framework for understanding." She walked to the door, then paused, and the technology will leak. Other species will find your designs. They'll attempt their own reverse engineering. Within 5 years, dozens of civilizations will be trying to master human technology. Some will succeed better than you. Some will fail catastrophically. But all of them will pay the price we've been paying for centuries. What price? Haiyan asked. The knowledge that reality is fragile, Hannah said. That existence itself is a suggestion rather than a certainty. That with the right tools and the wrong perspective, you can break the universe.
No.
Most species never learn this. They live and die thinking reality is solid and dependable. You're about to teach your entire civilization that truth is optional. That's a weight that never lifts. She opened the door. We put warnings in those blueprints for a reason, Commander. Our technology isn't advanced, it's cursed. You've learned to live with the curse. I hope you can do the same. After she left, Haiyan stood alone in the conference room for a long time, watching the stars and thinking about curses. 6 months after Ambassador Hannah's warning, Haiyan stood in the Hall of Victory on Vryn Prime. Accepting medals he didn't want for a triumph, he couldn't celebrate. The Battle of Kethrin. Gate had lasted 8 minutes and 17 seconds. The Vryn fleet, equipped with human-derived dimensional cutters, scaled up to ship-mounted weapons, had faced the largest Kethron armada ever assembled. 3,000 enemy vessels against 400? Vryn ships, the Kethrons never had a chance. The dimensional weapons didn't destroy ships in any conventional sense. They removed them from causality entirely. One moment a Kethron cruiser existed, the next moment it had never existed. No explosions, no debris, just absence where presence had been. The Kethron fleet simply ceased to be, erased from reality like mistakes wiped from a chalkboard. The war was over. The Vryn had won, and Haiyan wanted to vomit every time he thought about it. The 400 ships that had carried the dimensional weapons returned to port. Their crews did not return unchanged. 60% showed signs of what the doctors now called dimensional perception syndrome. They could see in directions that didn't exist. They perceived time as negotiable. Some could look at a person and see all the possible versions of them that might exist in parallel realities. 20% were manageable with medication and regular therapy. They could function in society mostly, though they never seemed quite present anymore. They looked at the world with eyes that saw too much. 40% were in specialized medical facilities, unable to interact with baseline reality. They existed in states that doctors couldn't properly describe. Salman was among them, still speaking in mathematical proofs, still trying to explain the shape of causality to anyone who would listen, and the remaining 40% were simply gone. Not dead gone. They descended during the battle, perceiving too deeply into the nature of what they were doing. Their bodies remained technically alive, but their minds had drifted into dimensional states beyond reach. They sat in medical pods, conscious but unreachable, occasionally writing equations on the walls that made no sense in three-dimensional space. Grand. Admiral Nari called it an acceptable casualty rate, a small price for ending a war that had killed millions. Haiyan had been promoted to Grand Admiral himself for his role in the victory. He accepted the title because refusing would have been cowardice. But he spent his nights reviewing the casualty reports, reading the names of people who'd sacrificed not just their lives but their sanity for the Empire. G1 visited him in his new office 3 days after the medals ceremony. She looked older than her years. Her hair shot through with premature gray. "It's leaking," she said without preamble. "What is?" "The technology, the weapons. Everything we learned from the human ship." She placed a data pad on his desk. "The Kethron remnant got their hands on some of our research. So did the Merchants Guild, and the Telvari Collective, and at least 6 other major powers. They're all attempting to reverse engineer human technology now." Haiyan felt sick. "How?" "Spies, defectors. One of our researchers sold blueprints for enough money to buy a moon. The information is out there now, spreading like a virus through the galactic community." She pulled up a report. "The Telvar have already had 3 research stations go dark. The Merchants Guild lost an entire vessel when their experimental drive accidentally removed the ship from causality. And the Kethrons." She paused. The Kethrons are forcing prisoners to study the blueprints, using them as test subjects to map the psychological effects. The humans warned us, Hyan-Wu said quietly. Yes, Guan agreed. They did. She sat down without being invited. I've been reviewing the human data cores, reading their history files. Do you know why their technology developed this way? Hyan-Wu shook his head. Desperation, Juan said. Humanity nearly destroyed itself in nuclear war. They were down to a few 100 million survivors, scattered across a poisoned world. They had to innovate or die, so they pushed into areas of physics and engineering that terrified them. They built tools that could break reality, because the alternative was extinction. And they survived. Hyan-Wu said, they survived because they're stubborn enough to use tools that could break their minds, and lucky enough that some of them could handle it, but they paid for it. Every advancement cost them people who saw too much, understood too deeply, and couldn't come back. Guan pulled up another file. This is from their medical archives. Humanity has an entire branch of medicine devoted to treating dimensional perception syndrome. They have psychiatric facilities specifically for people who've ascended beyond baseline reality. They have support groups for the families of those who can no longer exist in normal space-time. They've built their entire civilization around accommodating the cost of their cursed technology. And we're following in their footsteps, Hyan-Wu said. We don't have a choice now, Guan said. The technology is out there. If we stop, others will continue. We have to adapt or be left behind. That night, Hyan-Wu couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Ambassador Hannah's words, about curses and costs and the weight of knowing that reality was fragile. He went to the medical facility where the Ascended were kept. The night shift doctor recognized him and let him enter without question. The facility was quiet, dimly lit, peaceful on the surface. But the walls were covered in equations. The Ascended wrote constantly, compulsively, trying to communicate truths that existed beyond language. He found Summon's room. She sat cross-legged on her bed, eyes open but unseeing in any conventional sense. Her hands moved through the air, tracing patterns that left faint trails of light after images that shouldn't exist, but did because she was partially outside baseline reality. Commander Hyan-Wu, she said without looking at him. Her voice was distant, echoing oddly. No Grand Admiral now? I can see the rank on you, not the insignia. The weight, the responsibility, it bends your timeline downward. Soman, Hyan-Wu said. Can you understand me? I understand everything, she said, and smiled. That's the problem. I understand that this conversation is happening across 17 possible timelines simultaneously. I understand that you've come here seeking absolution I can't provide. I understand that humanity's curse is now ours, passed down like genetic damage through the generations. She finally looked at him, and her eyes held depths that hurt to see. Do you want to know the cruelest part, Admiral? The humans are compatible with their own technology, because they evolved to be, but we didn't. We're forcing ourselves to adapt to tools that were never meant for our minds. We're breaking ourselves against concepts our neurology can't properly process. And we're doing it because the alternative is irrelevance. Was it worth it? Hyan-Wu asked. So Min considered the question for a long time. Ask me in 100 years. Ask me after we've built our own support systems and learned to live with what we've become. Ask me when the Vryn civilization has either adapted or collapsed under the weight of knowledge we were never meant to bear. But if you want my opinion now, from this perspective outside normal time, we had a choice when we found that derelict. We could have destroyed it completely. We could have respected the warnings. We chose pride instead. We chose power, and now we'll pay the price for centuries. Hyan-Wu left the facility as dawn broke over Vryn Prime. The sky was beautiful, painted in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in that sky, research stations orbited, filled with engineers studying human technology. Somewhere out there, other species were making the same choices the Vryn had made. His communicator buzzed. A message from Fleet Command. The Telvar Collective had successfully replicated a human drive system. They'd achieved faster-than-light speeds 3 times faster than any previous engine. Their test ship had arrived at its destination in record time. The crew had ascended during transit, all 200 of them. It's gone into dimensional states beyond recovery. Hyun-Wu thought about Ambassador Hana. He wondered if she'd known how it would play out. If humanity had watched this same pattern repeat across other species, other civilizations that discovered human technology and thought they could master it, he thought about the human warning. Our technology isn't advanced. It's cursed. We've learned to live with the curse. Zevrin, we're learning now too. Learning that some gifts were indistinguishable from weapons. Learning that understanding could be more dangerous than ignorance. Learning that in reaching for the stars, they'd grasped something that changed them in ways they couldn't undo. A child's voice interrupted his thoughts. A young Vrin girl, maybe 8 years old, tugged on her mother's sleeve as they walked past. The girl held a data pad, the kind used in schools. "Mama," the girl said, "this math problem is weird. It shows the same equation solved 2 different ways, and both answers are correct." The mother glanced at the pad and froze. Hyun-Woo saw her face go pale. She gently took the pad from her daughter's hands. "Don't look at that anymore, sweetie," the mother said, her voice tight. "I'll talk to your teacher about getting you a different assignment." But the girl's eyes held a distant quality now, seeing something beyond the street and the buildings and the morning sky. She'd glimpsed the edge of it. The place where mathematics stopped being safe and started revealing truths about reality that young minds shouldn't comprehend.